casting a new paradigm on the One Network.
All right, I got you on there, Matt.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am BlueStar Deerwomon, and I'm here to do an interview with Matt Reid for the One Network. And we were just chatting just a few minutes ago, and basically I wanted our audience and listeners to know that I had the opportunity to listen to an interview that Matt did on the Super Woo Radio. And I'm hoping that you actually include that link, Matt, when we put up your information on this page.
Sure.
And what totally resonated with me, Matt, was you have such a brilliant a way of articulating about consciousness. And that, to me, is the invitation to you. And I know we have many perceptions and perspectives shared in the world, and there are some that are actually familiar, almost predictable. But I found you so refreshing, Matt, and I'm going to leave this interview wide open because I feel like any subject that you address is going to bring your brilliance forward.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. You know, I sometimes I'll feel this urge after having had some of my out of body experiences and sort of just coming across some of this knowledge through different circumstances. You know, I don't have a book I'm trying to sell. I'm just like a normal guy, like, you know, just a normal person like our listeners. And I just like to sort of talk about these things, like these far out concepts in like a down to earth kind of way. So just thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Now, I noticed in your write-up, you make reference to universal lessons of respect and discernment. You made a reference to that. And if you would like to start there, I welcome your thoughts and your feelings.
Great. Yeah, let's go ahead and just get right into it. Kind of, you know, discernment of motive or just discernment of thoughts and co-respect, like you're mentioning. One of these kind of out body experiences I've had that really showed me that in the first place was I actually kind of stumbled into an astral chamber. If people have listened to interviews with me before, I would go into some trance states for quite a few years there and use a few different shamanic plant tools to kind of really just take a look at the other side for myself, get a look at what all these stories are talking about, and basically just being in these spaces that we're not used to out of our bodies. All of a sudden, as you start to adapt to that situation, a lot of the same kind of internal feelings come up when you meet a new person. You know, something about them seems suspicious, or something subtle in their body language makes you wonder, are they telling the truth to me right there? So in one of these initial experiences, I was in this kind of red-orange chamber, and there was a gigantic snake guarding this place. And, you know, I was just surprised to sort of be here, and the snake took a very aggressive, poised position, getting ready to kind of strike me down. And I immediately just thought out loud, like, whoa, hey, buddy, like, I'm not trying to take anything from you. I don't know how I got here. I don't know where this is. I'm sort of just wandering around, looking around, and, I really don't want to cause any harm towards you. And I could almost feel from the snake, I should also say, in these experiences, all of my feelings are so much more sensitive, so much more subtle. And I could immediately sense from the snake almost like a laughter, like, oh, this guy just came out of nowhere. He's not trying to like break reality or anything. He's like this normal guy who, doesn't want to bother me. And so we could sort of feel each other out. And the snake sort of just relaxed and went back into his spiral and sort of let me know. He said, hey, you know what? Go ahead and look around all you want. You don't bother me. So, I don't know, in these sort of what seem like such far out experiences, I've been really humbled to find that they're really no different than the engagements that we have on a day-to-day basis with the people around us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would absolutely agree. And that was the question that was moving in my mind, is that when we work with the plant tools, how do we come back into this present reality, sometimes referred to as the ordinary reality, and integrate those insights? And I think that's exactly right on, is that our sensitivity deepens and we see that that reality is here with us in every moment.
Absolutely. I've, the more and more I think about it, I think that this reality is just as wacky and far out as any of the other, holographic realities of light. Mm-hmm. In some ways, the sort of like cosmic sense of humor on Earth could be seen as being even more hardcore than some of these other astral areas. I think there's a lot of like unique experiences going on the Earth plane. Mm-hmm. that I think are actually a lot newer than maybe some of those realities that have been around for, say, the whole age of the universe. I'm starting to feel more and more like this is the sort of fantastic like reality of the physical, that if you live in the astral, it's like that's the legend, They're living in a world where they're used to living in light, and that's where they come from. It's more spiritual. And they probably talk about, oh, have you heard of the dense earth experience? It's all physical. Mm-hmm. All the light is packed together much more tightly. There's violence, hunger, all these things are going on that we don't even know about here. So what's been funny is, just to see like, oh, this is a weird, crazy astral realm as well.
I love that. Well, often I give my attention to all the planetary existences, and I think about it in, for lack of a better word, in a diplomatic way, that when we make acquaintance and visits with other worldly beings, that there's a certain protocol, there's a certain sensitivity that each of us needs to bring forward, such as our telepathic ability, to be able to sense each other and then establish some kind of mutual relations that, in my understanding, needs to be of no interference, but friendly relations, and allowing ourselves to communicate and find out who we are.
Absolutely. No, that's a beautifully put. Really like laying out the ground rules, right? Mm-hmm. Because especially in the beginning when I was getting into this, it was difficult to even absorb a thing. It felt sort of like a fleeting dream that I was just so not used to what I was looking at that I couldn't even come back and tell you heads or tails of anything. I didn't have the relation with it. But I began to use my consciousness consciously thinking, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to not be overwhelmed, and I'm going to remember. I sort of put the consciousness in motion from the very get-go, and I'm sort of laying out the ground rules. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've also found when I'm over there on the other side, I've had engagements with both positive and negative beings. Sometimes even the ones that have a nasty sort of exterior have ended up being more friendly or more honest. And again, what sort of determined that, what let me understand that, was really just laying that ground rules of, requesting, are we all showing our true form right now? And what will happen sometimes is when I put that thought out, it suddenly is detected on their side, oh, we see where he's coming from, and they'll either go away or they'll open up even more to me, sort of like, okay, yeah, we're even more honest because you're being discerning to this extent, and we can sense that. What it's kind of reminding me of is I had this great conversation with these three kind of tall guys, these three tall men of light, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we were actually going through the process of how the telepathy was working between us. And we were going through the process of, oh, Matt, you're considering this and you're considering this and this. They already knew. No spoken words necessary. It was as though those ground rules were just emanating. Mm-hmm. And, those beings in particular, they sort of applauded, like, oh, you're wondering what's real versus what's unreal. What is, feel contained and constrained versus a spirit wanting to feel liberated. And, what a coincidence that you come from Earth, where these very questions are sort of being experimented on and being considered, in this full physical expression. Mm-hmm. And also, please pardon me if it seems a little bit all over the place. It's sort of a fleeting type of conversation.
I think that's part of the magic of the threads that we intend to share here tonight.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to have a lot of fun here. We're hitting the ground running, so this is great. What was really cool is because I had that question. I was wondering, how is telepathy working with you guys? Like, how do you know the consciousness rules that I'm like emanating without realizing it? And they very clearly explain to me, well, that's just how consciousness has always worked. It doesn't matter, if you're a fish or you're a bear or whatever it is. If you are sensitive enough, your consciousness will take the consciousness of another and explain it to yourself in a way that your consciousness knows that you will understand. And they thought it was very interesting that I was taking their intentions, their consciousness, and I was then converting it into the English language, which I then was using to communicate to myself what they were emanating, what they were communicating.
Let me ask you this, Matt. With that kind of exchange and awareness, have you been able to transfer that into this present reality, what I call the ordinary reality? Have you been able to identify that same telepathic exchange with other brothers and sisters?
I would say absolutely yes. It's absolutely true. The biggest difference, I would say, is it's as though we've got about 50 wool sheets covering our spirit. So when we're suddenly out of our body, at least from my own experiences, I could barely remember what the body even was. It wasn't a part of my whole being at that moment. it's like sort of a direct connection. When we're in the body and we're in this world, there's all these electromagnetic frequencies going through the air. We've gone for thousands of years now where we kind of don't really believe in like hocus pocus kinds of things. So I feel like that actually adds to the sort of resistance in a way. I've been able to do it. Like I have what we call synchronicities happening to me like on 7 to 12 times a day, to the point where I don't even pay attention to it anymore. I just sort of go with things and I don't even think about it twice, which is another one of those things that I think lowers the resistance of that sensitivity and that connection. Mm-hmm. I believe it wholeheartedly. Like I don't have any doubt in my mind about it because of these experiences. And that's another one of those sort of removals of a blockade. So we've just got sort of more more passageways that we need to negotiate in the physical. Whereas when we're out of our body, it is just such a direct connection. It feels like, oh, this is happening all of a sudden. But really it's happening all the time. And it's just that level of resistance really is that key factor.
So with that kind of information, have you telepathically opened up communication with your physical self in asking how to bring that experience through?
That's really funny. When I met these three guys, one of the things I sort of excitedly told them is, I'm going to do everything I can to bring this like feeling back with me, or to bring this type of experience back with me, so people can have some form of an understanding. Mm-hmm. And they sort of like laughed amongst themselves, saying like, oh, we know you will. Yeah, we're sure of that. Sort of as though they could. I don't think they were in time space the same way I was in time space. Like I'm kind of locked in this kind of embodiment. But they were sort of able to be like, oh, the reason we're even meeting and having this exchange is because you're probably going to be talking about it later. So yeah, I don't know, the way these things sort of line up and meet each other, it's kind of outside space and time sometimes.
Well, that's interesting that their response was so knowing that you were going to attempt to translate this through language. So they already had a sense of your own direction, or do you think it was just an understanding of the density realm that we live in?
They knew I was going to go back and I was going to tell stories. Sort of like this kind of thing has happened before. Like, on one hand, I do think they could, I've had my life flash before my eyes, like nearly a dozen times. And this is because these entities can read me. And sometimes as I got more experienced, I would give permission for this to happen. But at first I did not give permission, and this would just be a normal, commonplace thing. And so I did get the strong feeling that these entities, they sort of have access to more information than we do from our sort of current position in our lifetime. They can sort of read more into us than we can necessarily read, at least in these experiences. I don't know if that's 100%, of course, but another element that's kind of interesting to that is they would, on several occasions, they've had this joke of like, well, we'll tell you about this element to your future, but we're not going to tell you about this because we don't want to spoil it. Like there would be a definitive line drawn as to what they would communicate to me versus what was like, we don't want to give away the show to you because it's sort of building up to this crescendo, and you're already kind of pushing it as it is. Very humanistic character. I've been sort of pleasantly surprised.
I love that. Can you communicate with those beings now in this particular state of consciousness, or do you sense that you've created or started a relationship with them?
I have a stronger connection with what we're all calling my higher self. Mm-hmm. I did meet my higher self a couple of times. He looked just like me. He just sort of had his act together a little better than me. His level of responsibility was higher than this portion of self in a physical body. I have my responsibilities for our whole. He has his responsibilities in his whole. And then I think he's even got like a higher self. I've gotten a strong impression it's like a fractal kind of relationship. This was really cool. When I met my higher self, it wasn't like a new hallway opening up that had never been there before. It was this hallway in my heart that was sort of subtle. That subtle internal voice became widened, wider and wider and wider. And it's like his attitude right when we met, like sort of face to face in the in-between physicality realm, was, oh, look who showed up. Hey, who do we have here? Wow, it's been a while, hasn't it? And I'm just like sort of almost like shaking the physicality off and sort of starting to remember the feeling of being over in the spirit world again. And it's like, it's a jaw-dropping like, oh, yeah, hey, it has been a while. I'm sorry about that. And so that connection that has always been there has become stronger. And then sort of on the flip side of that, I had this very interesting engagement I've spoken about in other interviews, where 4 monks approached me, trying to tell me I was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And here they were in glittering, pearly gates of endless clouds of heaven, and it looked legit. It lived up to the hype. It was, here I am, here they are. But I still had enough of myself with me where it rubbed me the wrong way. I don't like chosen oneism. Mm-hmm. I kind of told them, like, I don't think you should, tell people that they're the single Christ, because we're all Christs. That's sort of besides the point. And actually that kind of, egoic motivation is a big problem on the planet I come from. Mm-hmm. So when you're trying to tell me who I am, I don't feel like that's exactly appropriate, and I need you to show me your true motives now, because this is what's on the table now, and I'm not going to continue further with you until we meet this co-respect that I'm now making known. And
go ahead. Matt, I think that's one of the areas that we're learning to demystify. I think for a while, we all made an assumption that all these other alternative beings were more advanced than we are, and that in truth that's not what's actually happening. And in my experience of meeting otherworldly entities, I'm learning that you really need to be in your spiritual empowerment, your authority, and really question motives, intentions, communication. Because just like what you're saying there, it's that, to stand in your power and say, hey, I don't believe in chosenism, which I love that word, by the way. And I think that's one of the things that we're waking up to on the planet, is that even if a craft comes and lands, just because they're in an advanced craft doesn't mean that we're not on equal turf.
Absolutely. No, that's so powerful and so true. I feel like, especially as time goes on and the new age community evolves, all of this evolves, it almost gets stripped back down to basics. The more and more I find the the more you get away those specifics, like, oh, you know, this is holy and this is angelic and, you know, this is Jesus and that one's Buddha over there. It's almost like besides the point. It's really like, how do I feel with this group in this situation? You know, I want to say that it's as simple as that, because in, you know, in that particular circumstance I was talking about, as soon as I mentioned, like, I'm not buying this, guys, 3 of them were gone right away. They knew that I knew, and they were like, not worth it. Too much of a bother now. You know, see ya.
Right.
And
now,
one of them, yeah.
Do you have that experience in this reality as well? That when you recognize that an energetic is perhaps diminished or doesn't resonate with your own truth, do you feel people actually disappear, walk away, or leave your life?
Oh, sure. No, that's the thing. I think that it's the same relationship in whatever reality you're in. You can sort of pick up on people's BS, I guess. You can feel like, oh, we were having a great, genuine conversation, but then they sort of made it all about them. Mm-hmm. Or they couldn't wait to, like, change the subject. I'm not talking about, like, conversation mistakes where people are, you know, honestly just trying to communicate with each other and we all get excited. I mean, you can sort of feel like this guy's like a jerk. Like, I don't know, he was cool at first, but he's not really the kind of guy you want to hang out with. I really do think it is as simple as that. And when we get all these, like, hierarchies and titles and you know, we got the Anunnaki coming at us and the reptilians, and I really feel like so much of that is just so besides the point. Because I've actually met a reptilian in one experience, and he was pointing out the harm I was doing to my lungs by smoking. You know, he may have been a little bit of a negative bent by sort of like being like, hey, you're causing your own self-destruction. But it was coming from a place of actually like, hey, get right with yourself. Like, this isn't an easy thing to look at, but maybe you should look at it. And I feel like that is this distinction of, you know, things bad happen in our life, or there's, you know, these bad people in our lives that will make us better ultimately. It's like for our own good, versus the kind of people who will, you know, they're just out to get you and take advantage of you completely. There's really no silver lining to it whatsoever. So that's the same distinction I've found sort of across the board.
As you say that, I often think of the reptilians, and I do see that they exist. They have their own entity and presence, and at the same time, like what you're saying here, is they actually become those mirrored reflections for us in the areas that we're trying to change or improve. So there's a fine line, and I guess that's sometimes the understanding of the spiritual learning that we're doing here on the planet, is that these essences are still going to be in our life until we co-create that they no longer are there. And I suppose with a subject like smoking, it's like, if we're holding any question in ourselves that perhaps I should look at this, then we're going to continue to attract those kinds of messages. Yep. Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. It's the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. It's really in your face when, you know, that sensitivity gets pumped up. Exactly what your mental state is, like your heaven or your hell. What you question yourself about, those sort of elephants in the room in your own psyche. Those are sort of links to that similar wavelength. Mm-hmm. And another kind of, but what you were just, you know, bringing up in me as you were speaking is there was an engagement with this blue entity who really felt like family. And his whole approach about, because when I was there, he could pick up on my sort of cosmic anxieties, worried about the whole thing is a sham. We're all in here as a prisoner just to suck the energy out of us and to make us run around in a merry-go-round with like evil beings and all this. Sort of addressed it so eloquently by first off sort of saying, what is at the root of that anguish, that aggression that you have a problem with, that hatred? What's at the root of that hatred? You call something evil, and there's this label that is, evil. But what is evil really? Besides the label of what evil is. Evil, usually, if not always, is a lack of love. So when you're continuing to hate on something because it's evil, you're feeding into that initial issue. The reason that because it has the built-up resentment, it has its built-up anxiety, it didn't receive what it needed, so therefore you get this aggression, you get this hatred. And don't you personally know what that's like in your own version? Don't you really deep down have empathy for those people who are evil because in one way or another you've done the exact same thing yourself? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was this sudden understanding. And then to sort of wrap it all up, they made this point saying there is only one family. The reptilians, the Greys, the Pleiadians, the Lyrians, whatever it is, it's all the same family, the same local family of this universe connected to the other universes. It's not as much of a cat and mouse game as we build it up. That's sort of like this drama that we're going through right now to sort of like learn from it. Based on my experiences and what's come through to me, all these like cards stacked against us, it's actually the universe has sort of built up all this baggage over the last billions of years. So in the newer realities, the newer existences, like this human form, which is a newer reality, the universe, nature itself, or nature ourselves, we sort of collectively decided, hey, let's put into this new experience those most difficult, heart-wrenching, sort of, it happens either way, whether we want it to happen or not. So let's integrate it into the reality and let's develop the genetics sort of in the pot, mixed amidst it all, just so that we can sort of build up that resilience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Metaphorically, I mean, you're really addressing the integration of light and dark when we can embrace that that's a oneness and it's not a duality.
Totally. No, and that was a tricky one for me because mm-hmm. It's like, what kind of embracing a duality are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Are we talking about, am I supposed to like do something bad as much as I'm like doing something good mm-hmm. to keep this kind of equilibrium? I don't think that's it. I think it's finding it in yourself, remembering what it was like when you were at that same wavelength and putting out an outstretched hand instead of like curling up your knuckles into a fist.
Yes, and I think also remembering, for instance, when we were in the womb, remembering darkness in general. We put a lot of focus on light, 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 and in essence, we're really feeding the negativity rather than seeing that womb-like space that is as integrated as the light within us, and knowing that it works together.
Oh, yeah. No, I've, upon returning to this reality, I appreciate how dark it is. It was kind of like too bright over there, like too much visual stimulus, like too much sound going on. Like just being there for like 5 to 10 minutes is like, okay, I'm ready to go back and like relax and put the TV on, because I've got a little ways to go to be ready for, you know, that kind of reality 24/7. And what I think, I get some poetic kind of like feelings too of, I think consciousness wanted some darkness, you know? Consciousness wanted like a night sky, but also wants like a beautiful blue sky half the time as well. Consciousness wanted to have all the love and light and unity of everything. And consciousness even wanted to push its own boundaries, take things up to the next level and be like, hey, and I'm going to challenge myself in any way conceivable to really see what I'm made of. So yeah, I feel like we need the blue sky. We need the stormy weather. We need the beautiful night sky. And in a weird kind of twisted way, we even need the smoggy cityscape for a while until we get like sick of it, you know?
Yeah. Well, excuse me. With your vision and experiences, do you have a sense of how we are going to unfold as a humanity?
I do, actually. I have one experience was specifically in reference to that question, responded by telling me, what if you and your friends could go anywhere and do anything? And at my first initial reaction to that was actually, I've never even thought of that as a possibility. You know, in my getting older, never even conceived of the possibility of being able to go wherever you wanted and do whatever you want with all of your friends. And as I was in that moment of confusion of like, oh, I've never even thought of that. The next thing that was said to me was, you are only dipping your toes into the new water. So that's like as much of a direct response as I've gotten. I'll put together my sort of structure of what I see progressing, but sort of breaking it down is that it's funny. This is another, you wouldn't expect it, but if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, is like has the right vibration to it. Like if you can deal with these aspects of yourself, like to themselves, like not having your higher self connected full force, just really your sort of baggage that you drag around with you, and the world that it shows, sort of this cosmic baggage. And I know that has like these negative connotations and everything, but you kind of know what I mean. If you can be face to face with like these darkest aspects of yourself, find forgiveness and empathy for that, you can somehow find the way to turn pollution around, find the way to turn like your societies around after you get sick of it for long enough and it's so in your face that push can only come to shove. Basically, I've gotten the sense of like everything's right on schedule, and yep, all the amnesia was part of it, forgetting yourself, because that's another one of these archetypes that happens out in the universe. And what do you do? What do you do when a whole race forgets who they are and they're alone on a planet? Well, that's kind of what we're doing, the back-breaking work of figuring out. And essentially, I believe it is on a whole level, like as the earth gets through these like dramas, and we do have to do every bit of it. My heart feeling is ascension or some kind of magical display that's going to make it all better. That's not it. It's us being left alone and doing the hard work step by step, by painstaking step, because that is actually, that's what the whole idea has been all along. The genetics are collecting that information. We're collecting that data. That data is so valuable because as we solve these issues, then those kind of similar issues can then be solved like en masse throughout, as like an echo effect from here, that fractal sensibility happening again. As each individual gets fixed here, all the individual universes out there are finding, more solutions to their personal dilemmas. And again, it's not all about dilemma either. I think the dilemma dramas, we've been sort of like putting those off, like, yeah, we'll get to those around like 8 or 9 billion years. Let's enjoy ourselves. And we kind of kept putting it off. Like, yeah, these wars and everything, everybody's dying and forgetting and, becoming like genetic lords of their own creations and making religions and everybody's worshiping everybody. We'll figure all that stuff out like down the line. And now here we are, like, finally, like the sort of like the show must go on. So it's like, are we like right at that teetering point where we get it, or are we, not going to get it? Or that's been the theme the whole time. So I think like the earth can only be that. It can only be like made up of all these drastic ironies and seem like it's teetering on the edge at all times because sort of like the sore on the body of the universe, everything's going to rise up to the surface that's sort of part of the whole. So we look at ourselves and we point the finger kind of without really recognizing what we're pointing the finger at.
So then, Matt, with that understanding, I mean, how would you speak to, there's such a movement on the planet, people have to wake up. We have to be more response able. So with that understanding, what's your perception in regards to that one? Because that seems to be a popular one on the planet.
I think that's a good one, I think all those different varieties of those different movements, that's like the body of nature, like expressing itself. I feel like the New Age kind of dogmas, they're not all dogmas, but just to, I guess, lump everything right now, it had its like benefits and its drawbacks. That was like the stage we were at. It was good that we were able to step beyond like the bounds of more traditional religions. But still, even when you take those first steps, it still is going to have some of those lingering, hierarchies or, our group versus their group, or we're better than them because we spin in circles like 50 times a day. But those guys got the crystals. So, it's like, I don't want to take away the motivation from people either. It's a good way to see it, I guess. It's like waves are always coming to shore. You could think of it as like a wave comes from the center of the galaxy and then it like hits our Earth and we're in the Roman Empire. And that's the stage at which the wave is hitting us. And then the wave is kind of coming in heavier, and then we're at like 2012. And now in 2012 versus the Roman Empire, we're really considering our world, our division of spirituality, our division of different cultures in a completely different way. And that is like consciousness sort of breathing or speaking through, the world. So I think saying like, hey, you got to wake up. You got to, like, as an individual, become responsive, become able. I can't find a lot of ulterior motive in that. That's what I try to, like, tell myself in the mirror when I, like, splash myself with some water when I wake up in the morning on a good day. So yeah, no, I think you kind of feel into each one personally, not who this guy says we should get along to this one. That's like kind of the same old song and dance that's been sort of leading us down narrow hallways to dead ends all this time. It's like, what will it take for us to finally put ourselves back in the driver's seat and kind of be in the moment and discern each circumstance individually, and not really have anyone else's opinion telling us what to do. So that's, I would say, is awakening. Sure.
Well said. I really appreciate how you put that together, Matt. And as I'm listening to you, I was thinking, okay, discernment, yes, it's a very significant tool. And I love that expression, put ourselves back in the driver's seat. And then what occurs to me is, well, diversity. It seems that we have not really touched on the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the richness of diversity. And we tend to separate still if our opinions are too different or somebody gets too passionate. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, no, absolutely. That term comes to me again of, there's only one family. But, how can you be certain? I think a lot of reality is like kind of answering that question all the time. Like, well, what if you change it like 0.5% and you add this variable? What happens then? What's that possibility going to lead up into? And I think that's why we see all these galaxies, and they're all sort of doing their own version of, crunching the numbers, so to speak. So I think part of that process of number crunching or of evolution is to remember that we're all a single whole. Maybe means you need to think you're all separated for a while, because maybe that's another one of those archetypal pitfalls that happens every now and then. It can be easy as an individual to suddenly make everything in individual terms. So this is like, oh, this is happening. We're sort of categorizing this and this and this, and we've just plumb forgot that it was all part of the same thing in the first place. And the universe is answering that question. What do we do when you're completely whole? You remember you're in the spirit world, then you're in a body, and you forget all that. You forget there even is a spirit world. All you've got is the two stones that you're smacking together in front of you, and this one's red and this one's gray. And it's like this very kind of tender-hearted like story of no, let's smash it to pieces into the smallest inconceivable broken, shattered pieces, and then arrange the reality so that it will put itself back together from that extreme position. And then that way you've got this understanding and this resilience that is arguably far more advanced than when you even started in the first place. So
with that kind of explanation, it's almost as if we haven't separated enough. It's almost,
I think we've separated enough.
But the line that I'm looking at is perhaps we haven't separated enough to know that we're in the driver's seat.
Oh, there, yeah,
okay?
I gotcha.
And until we all get in the driver's seat, and I trust that the organic impulse is going to be drive to the togetherness, but
yeah.
We haven't gotten in the driver's seat yet, so maybe we are still in line for a little more smashing up.
Yeah, it does feel that way. I feel like kind of like like my kids are really going to see like a different world. I don't think it's right around the corner like a lot of people do. I'd love for it to be right around the corner. I just can feel like how much hard work there is really left to do. And I don't see the like quick fix really. And in a way, personally, I don't want the quick fix. But yeah, no, just like you're saying, and what I will say, it's funny when a person starts to like get in the driver's seat, as we're saying. It's as though nature around you is like making things a little easier, and all this coincidence is happening that's like working out for me better than, and I feel like when you're trying to be like, oh man, I need to like start a bigger business that's like going to beat out Google. You're kind of like going down the old road, and that road's a little rockier, and things don't really like naturally seem to line up quite the same way. And I think it's because it's like the current of the universe isn't in match with you. It was like, if you wanted to do that, you needed to get on, that like 20 years ago. Like permission had been granted to just make a mess. Sure, get completely self-obsessed, push it to these extremes where the kids are starving, and then next door there's like the billionaire who's like swimming in gold. That was like, like Zeus saying to Hades, sure, go ahead and test them because they're good. It's like we've been in this like Hades sort of period, or we've been being forged in the furnace of disharmony, industrialization, me versus the world. And it's kind of like, we're showing ourselves, and because it's all fractal, it's like the season of the grander universe is now saying, okay, that season's over. We've sort of garnished everything from that we want to, really. And now it's time for the season of building yourself back together with all those tiny little pieces. And I do feel like that's why, we go for this in life, and it's like, oh, that just worked out like no problem with this friend, and oh, that was great. But when we're trying to do this, it's like, 7 interviews in a row went wrong, and, the project fell through, and, I think, again, it's like life is like speaking to us all the time, showing us what the season is, or, yeah.
This sounds like you made reference in the bio that we're going to include in the site, the Universal Fractal Story. That's a term. That's a term. Is this what you're speaking to?
Yeah, that's kind of my own term. And that's sort of this, like if I distill all my experiences and my conclusions, that's it. It's also, you could say, like, there's nothing new under the sun kind of feeling. Like the dramas we see on Earth are part of this very ancient heritage. There's been this like story being written for billions of years now in the universe that's been the universe. It is like this story that has been unfolding since the Big Bang. And every little part of the whole thing is part of this sort of like eternal nursery rhyme in a way. Experience that comes to mind was with those 3 beings I met. They were trying to place me in the era that I came from. And at first they were like, oh, he's from like, the Beatles, and suddenly there's visions of the mop tops and like the suits and like fill the space. And then the other one says, no, he's more like when Hollywood movie stars were really popular. And then there's all these like this glitz and glamour suddenly like fills the space. Also, when we were talking about language, the whole English alphabet filled the space, and we kind of went through like each letter and the different textures of each sound and all this kind of thing. Like, it's really remarkable, but I'm getting a little sidetracked. But basically, sort of like sensing, oh, these beings are out of time. They're sort of referencing time periods like, oh yeah, remember this chapter of Earth, or remember like, on page 9,842, he's more from like this era. It made me sort of recognize like, oh, this is like, these are just like new additions to this story that's been going on forever. And what makes up this story is the sort of fractal of the universe itself. All these, hot and cold, dark and light, love and sadness, birds who beat their wings so hard that they take flight, or, it's like, I also say everything we see, it's like a collection of like the universe's greatest hits. Like, we've got like mechanized war, or we've got like political war. And it's like, you can't like make a reality out of something that's not there. So when we have the eyes to see and the ears to listen, we're actually like, the universe is being loud and clear. Like, this is what goes on. Here's like this first stage of it. Not even a first stage, but here's a stage of existence that, you live one lifetime through, and when you return to spirit or you continue, you're going to get like 10 times more compressed universal archetypes than say you're over on, in this astral realm that's been doing the same thing for the last like 100 million years. There isn't really, it's doing its routine. So I think in the sort of uniqueness of what we can see in this really relatively new reality on Earth, is like the universe like referencing itself. And like I said, that is what makes up the reality around us. So that's basically what I mean by that term.
All right. Thank you for that. Also, as you continue to source from the experience with your the plant tools that you've been provided, it seems to I feel such a lightness with you, Matt, and I'm very grateful to be sharing that with you. You have a real lightness and ease, yet you see the world as it is. And so in going forward, or just like if you were to take 2 steps in your world right now, how has that magical journey or journeys enhanced that lightness? And do you know what I'm speaking of?
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's actually stemmed I had those big experiences probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. I've sort of, I've just been taking from those experiences the wealth that was already presented to me. And basically it's like I hear a lot of like people coming from these like very like being in anguish about all this. And I remember that anxiety, because it's like reality is a really scary place when you start to think about it. And people are telling us like, oh, you got to go into the light, or no, don't go into the light. You might get vacuumed up. That's the Metatron vacuum cleaner that recycles souls and feeds off your spirit. It's like such a mess that my only course of action being involved in this mess for like years upon years now has been to just like kind of walk away from it, but not taking my eye off it. I'm I'm stepping back and I'm stepping back, but I'm still considering the totality of what's going on. It's also like I would be personally frustrated with some speakers who would say like, oh yeah, you know, we had to do all this evil because that was the only way to get the universe to bounce back into be light again. And it's like, I'm like banging my head against the wall because I'm thinking this is so much besides the point, and it's just misdirecting people like more than they've already been misdirected. So it's like for a while I just like had nothing to do with it. And then when I came back to it, thinking of it in this renewed way, it's really a special thanks to that tall blue entity, and also it seemed like his wife, this tall pink entity, who really they pinpointed that frustration and anxiety, and what I explained before about there's only one family, you know, what's really at the root of evil, and isn't evil just like a label anyway? You know, what is it really? And they also voiced this calmness of like, it seems really bad where you're at, but you're in a very unique situation. You know, for the absolute most part, every single tiniest fraction is totally understood or kept track of. There isn't like a particle out of place. Like, don't get worried about that. That's not what your experience is about. Your experience is kind of about you making these conclusions from the particular position that you find yourself in. And it's like, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, really? Like, you're worrying too much. That was also my higher self, like, on the second time I met him. The first thing he says to me, like, right away, he's like, Matt, you worry too much. Like, you're just out of control with your worry about things that you have like no say over, or like I've even met some more menacing entities in this very menacing appearing, like, you know, dungeon chamber, and they're coming at me all tough, and then they just stop in their tracks and they like look at each other. And because I'm already thinking about them and thinking about the place, and they're immediately like, oh, no, we're not going to bother with him. One of them, he yells out to me, he's like, you're like messing with my head because I never even thought about things to that extent. You're making me feel worried, basically. So it was just like a lot of, you know, like walking away, walking back, like remembering like those sort of like core communications, and then like discovering again for myself just in normal reality, like, yeah, this wavelength like holds up. It really does. It's the same kind of thing of when a stressful situation happens, you know, we freak out and we get worried and we make it like 10 times worse. It's like build the resilience. So even in the like worst case scenario, you have like a strong foundation. You even when you're imperfect, you still find enough of yourself to like bring yourself back to like enough of a balance. And this other sort of like big relief was this communication of, because I, you know, as holy and as much as I appreciated everything, I would still question things, and the nice ones didn't have any problem with my questions. Some of them, you start asking questions and they're like, oh, we're running out of time. You know, you're sort of like ruining things. Well, I guess I'll see ya. It's like a totally different attitude. But I asked this question of like, well, then why do you even let like bad stuff happen? Because it sucks. And the response is, like, we're still answering that same question ourselves. Mm-hmm. And is your solution that we should limit expression? Is that what we should do? Make it so you just can't express yourself a certain way? From our experience / your experience, that doesn't really work either. So the sort of like solution that's sort of keeping the whole show like running and keeping it afloat, keeping it like sustainable, is that he says, like, there always is kind of more good that comes from it than how bad the bad is at the end of it all. Like, how good those good feelings feel is way more solid, way more everlasting than how bad the crumbling bad stuff can ever be. That wavelength of stuff is always like a house of cards struggling to keep itself built. And then this wavelength of unconditional love, empathy, you can build star systems out of it. You can build realities out of it. You can essentially generate, like, that's where the true, power is. I don't even like to say power. It's not even like that. It's just like, this wavelength is solid. This wavelength is not so solid. So we're not going to limit expression. We're going to be here for everyone the whole time, through the whole thing. Not a particle lost, not a single particle. Let it take as long as it needs to take, because there's no time constraint. And we're always garnishing more good out of it than the bad that comes from it. And that's just sort of where it's sort of leveled out, apparently.
Well, Matt, you must have heard me telepathically, because I was going to move towards concluding our conversation and ask you for some parting thoughts and messages, and I feel like you just so eloquently offered that to us.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, that was just so just holistic. It was all there, complete. But I will say, if there's any other parting messages that are coming through you, I've so enjoyed this experience with you. And I hope others feel the same kind of lightness that I am feeling in this resonance.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It's, it's that feeling I was talking about in the beginning when you listen to some of these interviews, and I was just like, I got to do another one. I got all this, like, that feeling pent up, and it's like, let's go, guys. We can feel good. It's okay. But I guess, like, a parting kind of thing is really that one family message I can't stress enough. And what comes with that is also, like, this sort of unconditional equality. From my own experiences, I'm meeting with, like, these 12-foot tall humanoid beings made of pure light, and I'm being blinded even though my eyes are closed, however that works. And we're in this, like, room of their own making. It's not even space anymore. It's like some liquid clay glowing, like, life. And even there at that, like, crazy place, they were emphasizing, like, oh, no, we're on the same page right now, There's really, you're over here, you're over there, or you're a tree or a rock, you're, whatever, but it's all the same stuff. It's all that single family. There really is no hierarchy. I think all that worrying and all that hierarchy, the sort of, like, dark hats, as they're called, I think they had to work really hard to actually, like, do a U-turn in nature. Because I think what does come naturally to us, and I think you see it in children even, like, we have our, like, little scuffles when we don't get along, but we're not so, like, menacing that we go so out of our way to make sure everyone else suffers and we, are making it. But then yet again, that is a part of us. So it's like, basically what I'm just trying to say is like the more you look at the big picture, the more you feel like, oh, there is no higher, there is no lower. It's kind of this grand equalizer when you sort of finally arrive at this place of like, things are happening because that's what the universe needs to happen right now. And I'm just as much a part of it as everything else is. And just let me do the best I can in my circumstance, right where I am right now. I feel like, you can't do any better than that. If you're trying to do the best you can in each independent circumstance, like, it doesn't matter what spirit guide told you what, or if you went to church on Sunday, or it's really like your relationship with yourself, and can you honestly feel like, you did what you could when you felt like you should. And yeah, that's as beautiful of a message to end on as any.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the resonant messages that's coming through me is I just really believe we are gentle, loving people in our core.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. It's true. There's more to our core than just that. And so the universe like fully embraced that. Like, all right, let's see what there is. Let's do it, guys. Let's make it like dark and crazy. And because we got this all under control anyway, at the end of the day, like your higher self and my higher self are like, having a cheers over there and being like, yeah,
Right. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for contacting the One Network and making the time and space to do this. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'd be happy to be on again whenever.
All right. I already held that within me, so don't be surprised. I give you another poke and say, come on, let's go further.
Very cool. Yeah, if people would like to contact me, actually, they can easily find my YouTube page. If the easiest way to get that is on Google, you type in Transcending Archons, and my YouTube page will come up. It's called Phila Sophia Zozo is the actual name. And that's also the same name, philosophiazozo@gmail.com. I get really nice messages from all kinds of people. So people can feel free to message me or whatever.
All right. And then you included that in the info I'm going to put on your page as well. Is that right?
I'll be sure you've got all that information.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good. Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, you have a blessed evening and stay connected.
Hey, you too. Thanks again so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.